Days ago, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken met with China's Xi Jinping briefly. And in this next clip, if it's any indication of how it went, and it is, it didn't go all that well for Anthony Blinken or the United States. We look weak and ineffective on the world stage. Watch this.
On Taiwan, I reiterated the longstanding U.S. One China policy. That policy has not changed. It's guided by the Taiwan Relations Act, the 3 joint communiques, the 6 assurances. We do not support Taiwan independence. We remain opposed to any unilateral changes to the status quo by either side. We continue to expect the peaceful resolution of cross-strait differences.
Kind of looks like the Chinese were right behind him with a gun to his head, forcing him to say that. It's like a hostage video. Maybe it was. So all comes as China is not only trying to protect their military strength around the world, project that is, but in our backyard too, right in Cuba, because new reports say the Chinese are looking to put troops on the ground in Cuba. So how should the U.S. respond to that? With me to talk about it, decorated U.S. Army military veteran. He served 2 combat tours in Afghanistan, was also assigned to NATO to support U.S. foreign relations. Adam Roosevelt. Adam, good to have you back.
Good to be with you, Steve. Good to see you.
Good to see you. And I know you're on the other side of the world in Dubai today. And so you're well-traveled. You've been on the front lines. You've been in hot LZs. You understand what we deal with militarily. Allowing the Chinese to come into Cuba when we didn't allow that to happen in the early 1960s with the Bay of Pigs and with the Cuban Missile Crisis, well, how can we possibly allow it to happen now?
Well, Steve, I tell you that the U.S. foreign policy strategy is definitely fractured in terms of its ability to be effective against China. China is using this stage to effectively create more influence in different parts around the world. They're doing stronger relationships in the Middle East with Iran and Saudi Arabia. This Cuba announcement is very interesting, but it is a strategic play in response to America's position in Taiwan. And this is to see how far America will go to effectively push back against China, given the latest trip we just saw from Secretary Blinken.
You know, Blinken was treated very poorly. First of all, when he arrived in the country, he was met by the American ambassador and a third-tier diplomat. He didn't even know if he was going to get a meeting with President Xi. When he finally did, he was seated several seats down to the right. Xi sat at the front of the table. They got together for about 35 minutes, which means they had about 10 minutes of productive conversation, maybe. And then he was lectured like he was a school kid misbehaving in 6th grade. It was embarrassing all the way around, wasn't it?
I share your thoughts on the meeting, and I'm unfortunate to have viewed it from the other side of the world and the laughing that is occurring in the Middle East and different parts of the world with America's performance on foreign policy under President Biden. But it is unfortunate that we've lost so much credibility, and we're continuing to lose credibility with our relations in Asia, Middle East, and different parts around the world.
Yeah, well, let's talk about this, though, because setting up shop in the Western Hemisphere is something completely different. The Chinese have set up shop, as we know, in Cuba. They're discussing building military fighter jets in Argentina. They've set up shop in Costa Rica. They have a giant Taj Mahal embassy now in the Bahamas where they've set up shop. They're surrounding us from the Caribbean to Central America to South America in our hemisphere. All while Joe Biden tells us that they're not a threat, that they're not competition to us, folks. Weird.
It's misinformation on the president's behalf, and I think that the entire objective of China was to deploy their Belt and Road Initiative, and it has intelligence capacities where they deploy agents into the United States and our allied territories like NATO partners. They've got strategic investments that they use to monitor the United States, our allies. They've been doing this for such a long period of time. Right now, we know that the national security strategy focuses on China, Russia, Iran. So to say that as the president, it's unfortunate, and it is misinformation, and it's really a negative impact to the American people because it's misleading the Americans around the world, and it's not in the best interest of national security.
It's certainly not. So why do we sit idly by? I'm going to give you the last last response here. Why do we sit idly by? We can't allow them to set up shop in Cuba. We can't allow them to build fighter jets in Argentina. What would you suggest? Because if we do these things, if we allow these things to happen, we will have a gun to our head. Give you the last word.
Well, Steve, I think this is a clear indicator that there's something that's not being publicly discussed in terms of President Biden's relationship, because it is such a difficult position to make that statement that there must be something more that we're not being told. And I would definitely hope the intelligence community, the Department of State, comes out publicly and keeps the American people informed, or else we're going to continue down the wrong path and impact our national security.
Adam Roosevelt, always appreciate you being here, my friend. Thank you, as always.
Thank you, Steve.